a new study concludes that lifestyle interventions or metformin can help reduce the progression from prediabetes to type 2 diabetes, but does nothing for reducing cardiovascular events, heart attacks, risk of cardiovascular death. Can we conclude that metformin or lifestyle changes are worthless? Absolutely not. This is a classic example of the headlines not matching the data at all. I'm Dr. Brett Scher, the medical director of DietDoctor.com, and I really want to talk about this study because in a way it's pretty frustrating. I mean, the headlines are clear. Lifestyle interventions do not reduce the risk of cardiovascular events for people with prediabetes. And how do you react to that? You say, well, why am I worrying about what I eat and exercising and getting adequate sleep if it's not going to change my outcome, if it's not going to help me live a healthier life in terms of heart attack risk and the risk of dying? And that's just an unfortunate conclusion from this trial because it's not the case. So let's get into the details, right? Because this is what really matters. So the article is called Effects of Long-Term Metformin and Lifestyle Interventions on Cardiovascular Events in the Diabetes Prevention Program and its Outcome Study. And it was published in Circulation. Now, but here's what you need to know about this study. This is a 21-year follow-up, so pretty long-term follow-up. But the trial itself was only a 3-year study. So they took over 3,000 people with prediabetes, basically defined as impaired glucose tolerance based on a glucose tolerance test. So they defined prediabetes, which is a pretty aggressive way of defining prediabetes, which is good, right? You're going to catch more people with prediabetes that way. But then they were randomized to metformin or to a lifestyle intervention program or to a placebo. So only one group had lifestyle intervention. The others had either had metformin, the other had placebo. And then they followed them for 3 years. And what they found at the end of that 3 years was there was a 58% reduction in the progression to type 2 diabetes for those who were in the lifestyle intervention program compared to control. And for metformin, it was a 31% reduction compared to the placebo who got no intervention basically, right? So it showed that lifestyle interventions and to a lesser extent metformin could help prevent the progression from prediabetes to type 2 diabetes over 3 years. Now, of course, what was the lifestyle intervention? It was eat less, move more, low fat, the classic recommendation. But what happened next? This is the key. What happened next was at the end of that trial, they said, okay, well, look, we showed a benefit of progression to type 2 diabetes with lifestyle interventions. Therefore, it's not ethical for us to withhold that information. So we are going to offer this lifestyle intervention to everybody. So everybody in the trial now has been offered lifestyle intervention. So then over the next, 18 years to make the 21-year follow-up, everybody was exposed to the lifestyle intervention. But there was no longer sort of an intensive management, right? It was eat less, move more, see you later, right? Like the little bit of instruction, but really not much follow-up or coaching or organized program or whatever. But they were all told to do it. So then how can you conclude 21 years later that the group that was initially randomized to the lifestyle intervention was no better than the other groups? Therefore, lifestyle intervention doesn't work for cardiovascular outcomes. Not the case, because at that point, everybody was exposed to the lifestyle and presumably was doing it. And of course, we have no idea who was actually complying with the lifestyle. So it's so misleading that I don't even understand why they would publish this paper, because by the time the 21 years were up, they all had equal exposure to lifestyle intervention, and we have no idea who was actually doing it and what they were doing. So I don't know. This paper, it takes a lot of time to crunch the data, to write the draft, to go through the editing process and the peer review and getting it published in a major journal. But I'm not really sure this changes anything or really gives us any information. All right, so what about metformin? That's easier to know compliance, but also there was a ton of crossover. People who were not initially in the metformin trial were now all of a sudden taking metformin, right? The doctors were now free to prescribe metformin as much as they wanted over the next 18 years. So that too has a ton of crossover, which really dilutes the strength of the data. So I have a lot of problems with this. One, because it's just not accurate, right? We can't say that the lifestyle intervention group remained the lifestyle intervention group. They all were lifestyle intervention groups by the end. Two, what was the lifestyle intervention, right? It was a recommendation to eat less and move more and eat low fat and good luck. And that's not helpful. We know that over the long run, that's not very helpful. So I guess the big reason for me making this video at all is just to say, be cautious with these headlines. Don't believe the headlines. You can poke way too many holes in this study. It's a Swiss cheese study, unfortunately. And look, studies are hard to do. I get that. To get a perfect study, especially a 21-year follow-up study, it's hard to do. But I wonder if we just would have been better off without this being published so we didn't have the confusing headlines. We need better nutrition science. No question about that. And this doesn't help forward it. So sorry about the downer of a video here. It was fairly negative, but I think it's important to understand that the headlines don't match the data. All right. We do have a whole educational guide on prediabetes at dietdoctor.com that is evidence-based and talks about what you can do to treat and reverse prediabetes and prevent progression to type 2 diabetes. So I highly recommend you check that out. I think it'd be much more informative than this study I just reviewed today. All right, we'll see you next time here on Diet Doctor News on YouTube. Thanks a lot, everybody.